Hey everyone, Friendly DocuFilms here. Today, let's talk about the Presidents of the United States. As of 2022, there have been a total of 46 presidents in United States history. I will be doing a video series talking about the presidents, with a few exceptions. If a president or ex-president is still alive, they will not be in this series, as their stories aren't finished yet. And seeing as how today is a very special Tuesday, and the 290th birthday of our subject, let's talk about the very first president, George Washington. George Washington was the first president of the United States. He served 2 terms, from 1789 to 1797. There's also an interesting fact about Washington regarding the United States Capitol, but we'll come to that at the end of the video. George Washington was born on February 22, 1732, the eldest of 6 children born to Minister of the Peace Augustine Washington and his second wife, Mary Ball. George was born in a tobacco plantation located on Pope's Creek in present-day Westmoreland County, Virginia. The plantation was called Pope's Creek and was built in 1657 by George's great-grandfather, John. The Washington family had made their fortune in the Virginia tobacco industry for 3 generations. Augustine Washington died in 1743, leaving his 11-year-old son the ownership of the family's new home, Ferry Farm. After graduating from school at the age of 15, George became a land surveyor and went on expeditions throughout Virginia, particularly west of the Blue Ridge Mountains. In 1752, Washington enlisted in the Virginia Militia, fighting alongside his older half-brother Lawrence and serving under Lieutenant Governor Robert Dinwiddie. At the time, the future United States was a colony under British control. When French invaders fought for control of the Ohio River Valley in 1754, the French and Indian War began. Lawrence died from tuberculosis during the war, and George retired before the war ended, inheriting his half-brother's mansion Mount Vernon in Fairfax County, Virginia. He also amassed a large number of slaves, a total of 317 at the time of his death. Washington joined the House of Burgesses in 1758 and represented Frederick County for 7 years. In 1759, Washington married Martha Dandridge, the widow of a plantation owner. In 1769, Washington joined the Virginia Assembly and started speaking out against British repression. At this point in history, the British were enforcing laws and taxes that made life unfair for the colonists. This came to a head with the Boston Tea Party in 1773 and the British retaliation with the Coercive Acts the following year. In response, Washington and fellow colonist George Mason created the First Continental Congress and declared war on Great Britain. The American Revolution began on April 19, 1775. Due to his past military experience, Washington was chosen to be Commander-in-Chief of the Continental Army, and he won a lot of battles. Arguably the most famous battle at this point in Washington's life was the Battle of Trenton. On Christmas Day in 1776, Washington crossed the ice-clogged Delaware River into British-controlled New Jersey and caught the enemy by surprise, winning the ensuing battle. Despite his many victories, Washington was forced to make camp in Valley Forge, Pennsylvania from December 1777 to June 1778. Short on supplies, Washington repeatedly tried to get Congress to send aid, but by the time they did, a quarter of Washington's men had died from starvation in the frozen conditions. The war finally ended with the Siege of Yorktown in autumn of 1781, which Washington also led the army in. On September 3, 1783, the Treaty of Paris was signed, officially making the United States a free country. Washington retired from the military, but was called back to oversee the ratification of the Constitution in 1787. In 1788, Congress created the positions of President and Vice President. On December 15th of that year, the first presidential election was held, which ended with Washington winning the presidency and being sworn into office on April 30th, 1789. For Washington's first year as president, Congress created the State Department, the Department of War, and the Treasury, all of which would be overseen by Washington, who also appointed John Jay as the first Chief Justice, and 5 other men as the Associate Justices. Washington's first term was defined by economic troubles, particularly the country's first financial crisis and run on the bank in 1791, and the Whiskey Rebellion, a 4-year protest against taxation on alcohol. 1791 also had Washington overseeing the ratification of future President James Madison's document, the Bill of Rights, which added the first 10 amendments to the Constitution. Washington was re-elected for a second term in March of 1793. Throughout his second term, he felt homesick and wanted to return to Mount Vernon. Deciding to retire from the presidency, Washington wrote his farewell address in September of 1796. Washington declined running for a third term in 1797, and Vice President John Adams became the second president, while Washington finally returned home to Mount Vernon, where he would remain for the rest of his life. Which wasn't long. On December 14th, 1799, Washington died at Mount Vernon from epiglottitis, a painful inflammation on the back of the tongue near the throat. Our first president was 67 years old. But he left behind an incredible legacy. Washington's face is on the $1 bill and the quarter, and lots of places are named after him. Washington State, the northwesternmost contiguous state, is not only named after him, but his face appears on the flag. There's even a town in central Washington called George. Georgetown University is named after him, and the Washington Monument was named after him and built to honor him. And there are lots of statues of him, including Mount Rushmore in South Dakota. Both his birthplace and Mount Vernon are now museums about him, and we celebrate his birthday, February 22nd, as a holiday. Even the United States capital city is named after him, which leads into that fact I mentioned at the beginning of the video. Washington is the only president to have never lived in Washington, D.C. The city hadn't been built yet, so Washington spent his presidency living in Philadelphia. However, Washington helped Pierre Charles L'Enfant design the city and even selected the future locations of both the White House and the Capitol building. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please hit the like button and subscribe if you want to see more. Until then, I will see you next time. Peace out.